developing new technologies and innovative techniques and advancing the care of children with congenital heart defects puts Central Illinois on the map with other world-class pediatric centers.
A lot of it's just a drive to try to change the field and try to innovate and move things forward in what we're doing.
That's Dr. Joe Turek, Chief of Pediatric and Congenital Heart Surgery at Duke Children's Hospital. And I'm Shelli Dankoff, your host for OSF HealthCare Accelerated. We appreciate you tuning in and remind you to be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. The medical community, in many ways, is connected across the country and beyond. It's how medical innovations and advances are shared, celebrated, and learned from. And that includes Central Illinois, which we sometimes say is the center of the universe because of the many paths that begin or cross here. And that includes today's conversation. Joining me are Dr. Joe Turek, Chief of Pediatric and Congenital Heart Surgery at Duke Children's Hospital in Durham, North Carolina, and Dr. Mark Plunkett, Chief of Pediatric and Congenital Heart Surgery at OSF Children's Hospital of Illinois in Peoria. Okay, so before we get to all of what brings you to Peoria and why you are here, I have to go into the Wayback Machine on this one for just a little bit. You grew up in Petersburg, Illinois, population about 2,200 people, located about 25 miles northwest of Springfield, the state capital. It's the place where New Salem, where Lincoln settled when he was first starting his career. So how does the kid from Petersburg, Illinois, end up a world-renowned pediatric heart surgeon?
I have to say I was given incredible opportunities growing up. So we were in Petersburg because my father worked for the State Board of Education, and he told me about this new high school called the Illinois Math and Science Academy that was opening up in Aurora, Illinois. And it was that opportunity to go to math and science that gave me this exposure to research and medicine. And I just kind of took it from there. And I started doing research as soon as I was a sophomore in high school. That led, the research, I didn't understand the research, but it turned out I was pretty good with my hands on the different models. And they said, well, you should be a surgeon someday. And it just one thing led to another. And there I was. I was a resident at Duke, just like Dr. Plunkett, for surgical residency, and stayed there and did adult heart surgery training, also like Dr. Plunkett. And you know, really, a lot of it's just a drive to try to change the field and try to innovate and move things forward in what we're doing.
So is that where the two of you first met, was back in residency years?
No, we actually did not overlap in training. He's a few years younger than I am. But there's a connection among the people that train at Duke, particularly the surgical surgery department. And it's almost like a fraternity,
It's like the brotherhood of basketball. It's the same thing for Duke surgery.
No, it is. And there's a connection there. And even if you didn't actually train with someone, you somehow connect with them at meetings and conferences and things. And then there was a little bit of overlap when I came to Peoria, and Dr. Turek was at the University of Iowa in Iowa City. We weren't too far away from each other and such. So yes, we've just been connected through the years.
So Dr. Turek is back in Central Illinois for a very brief period of time to be the keynote speaker at the second annual Dale Geis Lectureship. I want you to talk a little bit about the genesis of that lectureship series and what it's designed to do and why we bring in speakers such as Dr. Turek.
Sure. Well, Dr. Dale Geis came to this program around 1980 with the dream of building and developing a pediatric cardiac surgery program, and literally built it from the ground up, and practiced here for 34 years. He was a skillful master surgeon. He was an innovator. He was creative and got outstanding results in treating children with heart defects. He was also one of those people that as soon as somebody else was doing something new somewhere, he had to go and see it so that he could come back and start doing it. And he did that throughout his entire career. And it's one of the things that I truly admired about him when I came here out of my training and worked side by side with him. He passed away a few years ago, and I felt he had contributed so much to this place, to this program, to the community at large over the course of his career that we would set up a foundation, and we would have a lectureship series, and we would bring in heart surgeons who,
World class, yeah.
Yes, and had his same spirit of innovation and advancing the field. And so obviously, Dr. Joe Turek came to mind immediately when I started thinking about who to invite this year. And I'm delighted that he's here.
Yeah, and oftentimes, because one of Dr. Geiss's things was people will sometimes say Peoria, and they'll give you that look where it's like, oh. And it's like, yeah, why not Peoria? And he absolutely championed everything in Central Illinois and said, yeah, absolutely, we can have that world-class care. The other thing he always did was the staff around. It wasn't just about the physicians. It was about all the care for the kids and connecting all those pieces and parts. That was really important to him.
Yes, it was. And he was quite the team builder, not only the team builder, but the team educator, and was training and educating everybody from the bedside nurses on up in order to achieve the great results that he got. Because it takes a village. It doesn't matter if you're an outstanding surgeon, you've got to have the team in order to get the good results. And
I think congenital heart surgery is the greatest team sport there is.
I agree.
It has to be, because everyone has to perform at the top of their game to get the outcomes we need for the kids.
No, it's absolutely true, and maybe more so than any other multidisciplinary program in medicine.
And to his credit, he sometimes could be the ultimate motivator, maybe not quietly, but he held everybody, including himself, to the same standard. And so there's nothing wrong with that when it comes to your patients.
That's exactly right. He had very high standards, and he set the bar high, and he expected everyone around him to rise to those standards. And yes.
The program thrived because of that.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
Continues to.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's talk about your presentation at the lectureship. It's called Pediatric Heart Transplantation, Understanding History to Shape the Future. Why is that important?
It's interesting when I've looked at how I can progress the field of congenital heart surgery, the first place you go needs to be in the past, and you need to figure out what was done before and why that wasn't successful, or how that pushed the field forward a little bit. And so when I look at every innovation that my team's been able to come up with over the last 8 years at Duke, they're all based on something that was rooted in the past, some kind of discovery that maybe wasn't taken to that next level, but it was a discovery, and it was an improvement on where things were. And so, I'm excited to give the talk because, I think that this is really the right lecture for me to give because, honestly, I knew Dale Geiss, and I knew stories about folks that trained with him like Dr. Plunkett, and I knew he was a master surgeon, an innovator, a team builder, a compassionate caregiver, and I'm hoping I can really honor his legacy with this talk.
And I just want to share something in line with what he just said, and that is taking an idea from the past and moving it forward. Dr. Geiss was among the first to explore and do a series of homograft mitral valve replacements.
Yes.
And he was here in Peoria. He was sort of pushing the field forward with that. Now, those homografts didn't tend to have the durability that we liked or wanted, but it sort of paved the way for
I read that. I read his article on that. I did. Yeah.
For the mitral valve transplant that was just performed at Duke.
It was an excellent idea that he had. I mean, his idea was we take these cadaver mitral valves. And mitral valves are very tricky because they're kind of like a parachute. So
Yes,
there's some artistry involved. You have to be a skilled surgeon like Dale.
No, that's right. And he taught it to me.
Yeah,
Yes. And then I just recently read about the mitral valve transplant down at Duke, and I reflected back on those days back in the 90s when Dale Geis was actually doing that with homograph valves, but laying the groundwork for what was to come.
That's right.
He had that vision.
He did.
Decades ago, literally. So let's continue down that path. So that's one of those other firsts. You've had a couple of firsts under your belt down at Duke. I mean, they're known for doing some pretty great work down there too. So talk about some of those firsts. Start with this one.
I'll start with the partial, we call it partial heart transplant because you take a part of a heart, it's freshly from a donor, and then you put that part of the heart, usually it's a valve, and then you put it in a recipient. And the great thing about it is for kids, they'll grow with them. Because there's no other valve that's out there that grows with a child. But if you take a fresh valve and you give them some degree of anti-rejection medicine, that valve will grow with them. And that's what the partial heart transplants are. So what's also pretty neat about partial heart transplant is I think when people think of a donor, they think of a deceased donor. Yeah. But the vast majority of our donors have been folks that have gotten a heart transplant and they've donated their old heart because the old heart muscle's no good, but the valves are great.
That's right. Yeah.
So that we call them dominoes. And so we take...
So it's like a chain.
It's a chain
like when
reaction.
you're doing kidney, you do the kidney transplants and you chain it. It's
a chain,
wow.
It's a chain reaction. And that donation rate is 100% because someone who's getting the gift of a new heart, they have been just, oh yes, please, I want to give my valves to
I didn't
someone
realize that was the case. That's awesome.
And then just 2 days ago, we did one that was, even more of a chain. It was a patient. We did a heart transplant on a patient of ours who already had a heart transplant. So it was a retransplant. And then we used the heart that was the old heart from the earlier transplant that we took out, and we used that for a valve for a child. So that valve has been in three different people. Doing its thing. So
okay, let's flash back really quick to the kid growing up in Petersburg, Illinois, and tinkering, and you're like, you're good with your hands. Could you ever have envisioned this?
No. I mean, honestly, this has been beyond my wildest dreams. Where things have gone, and they just all kind of build on themselves. You kind of and you get around people that think in a similar manner. And it helps to push that innovation. I mean, I'm sure it was great when you came on board with Dale, and he was like, "Hey, I got a partner in crime here to come up with crazy stuff."
Because whatever he was going to do, I was willing to jump in and join in. Right, whatever. It was great. Very like-minded.
So, how important is it to advancing the field because of those techniques and those technologies and being innovative? Because these kids grow up. They become adults. They're not children with congenital heart things going on. They become adults. So why is this obvious?
I'll give you an example. So the first partial heart transplant that we ever did was for a child. It was a newborn. And we knew this is when we kind of had this thought that we were going to do this. The child was still in utero. We knew from the prenatal ultrasounds that the child had something called truncus arteriosus. So instead of having two arteries and valves that come out of the top of the heart, only one artery and valve. And unfortunately, that child's valve was no good. So this child needed two valves replaced, and the hope was two valves that would grow with that child. And so we were planning this all out, and ultimately what ended up happening is that we had everything set, and we put it together. We were able to get a valve. 17 days of life for that child. I mean, we were about ready to say, we got to do something else because the child wasn't doing well.
Right.
And we replaced both those valves. That child turned 3 years old a couple weeks ago and is thriving, and his valves are growing. Both of those valves are growing with him. Now, that same child, we published a paper looking at patients that had that same disease with the way that standard of care used to be done, where you put in homographs, cadaver valves, right?
That's all you had.
And 50% of those children don't leave the hospital. And then 15% per year of those that do survive pass away every year.
Oh, wow.
Because it's just higher and higher risk every time you're in there. So for this child to have had one operation as a newborn with valves that are growing with him, and he's 3 years old now, is really miraculous.
Yeah, and it solves an old problem that we've wrestled with in the fact we have nothing that grows. We have nothing that keeps up with the child's growth. And if you put something in a newborn or a baby, you're going to be back in there replacing it pretty quickly because it wouldn't grow. Now this is like an amazing advancement in my mind.
It's kind of like the EV-ICD work in some ways that your team just did.
Just opening, new doors, right? Or showing, yes, it can be done, and now it has wide applicability because
I want to hear more about that. I
read
the articles.
Yeah, hit a little bit. Hit the highlights again as we have it in party here. What took place there?
So we had a 2-year-old who arrested at home. The parents acted very quickly, performed CPR. The transport team the ambulance was able to get there and get the child to our medical center. We were able to resuscitate. Started looking at causes and diagnosed the child with Brugada syndrome, which is a sort of a malignant dysrhythmia, that causes sudden death. And here we had this child that not only had we resuscitated him, but he was neurologically intact. So this EV-ICD that Medtronic had just recently developed in the last year or so, but was designed for adults,
right.
Yeah, and so we were able to successfully implant that device. And while we were adjusting medication and trying to manage the rhythms that way, it did fire off a few times. But now I think we're treating that child. I think we've got therapeutic levels, and so now
he's doing well,
doing very well now.
I always think about the parents, and so again, in utero, there's going to be a problem with their child, and obviously, there's lots of pre-planning that goes in no matter what type of case you're talking about. You just don't wake up one morning and go, okay, tomorrow we're going. There's lots of stuff. Right. Talk to me a little bit about what that process is like, and especially when it's a first of, and then talking to any caregiver.
Right. Well, every time I've entered one of these first of situations, I feel pretty good about it going in. I mean, I obviously wouldn't try to introduce something to a family that I didn't think had a very high chance of success. And a lot of the reason for that is because we will do the research in the laboratory ahead of time. So for example, for the first patient, for the partial heart, when I went to the family, I wasn't able to talk to him until the child was born because I wanted to verify that, yes, this is the disease that he had, and I had to get some things in order, right, to be able to do this. But when I talked to them, I laid it out and I said, well, this is my logic. I'm not pushing this at all, but I think it could show promise. And here's the alternative, which isn't great. Yeah. And so they asked me, they said, but you're saying you've never done this before. And I said, in a human. I said, I've done 5 piglets. Okay. And it worked really well. And she said, well, then I guess he's going to be your first human. Let's do it. So, and they were thinking about, like, how can we help other kids? There's one thing really interesting about heart families is they become a real community. You've seen this,
absolutely.
over the years.
Yes.
And they become a real community, and it's not just about my kid. It's about all the heart kids.
The science. It's about helping others.
And moving things forward. It's an incredible community.
It really is. Yes.
Okay. And you also have to have the support, though, of Duke University or University of Illinois College of Medicine, which doesn't matter who. There needs to be a lot of support from the players around this, correct?
Right. Oh, absolutely. I mean, this was I made so many phone calls just to make sure that, everyone had my back, and they did. Right. I mean, they were like excited about it. They said this could be a real game changer. I'm sure you felt the same way.
Yeah, yeah. But
you've got to sell it a little bit, though.
Sure, but everyone has to
realize how big a deal this could be.
That you're doing this, and so that nobody looks back and doesn't agree or what have you.
Right.
So what do you see on the horizon? What are some of those future major advances? If you could look into that innovation crystal ball things coming down the pike for both of you, what do you see?
Well, I see, kind of in line with this talk about heart transplantation, I also see that every innovation I'm talking about most of the innovations I'm talking about up front are things like, for example, partial heart transplant from human to human, or developing tolerance so you don't reject a heart transplant if you also transplant the thymus from the donor, which is another world's first that we performed, or trying to figure out how to increase the donor pool. The real trick here to kind of getting over that hump is going to be to be able to have xenotransplantation live and well.
That's about what I was going to say. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. For us non-medical people,
xenotransplantation is non-human. So from a pig or a piglet or whatever. And yes, and that is on the horizon. I mean, that's really
in the laboratory. We're doing both partial heart transplant, xenotransplant, as well as full heart transplant xenos right now. So piglet to monkey,
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, for some of us who grew up in a certain era, there was the baboon heart.
Yes.
You remember that? It was a big thing.
Yes, it was a big thing.
Highly published. What was that? That was Loma Linda.
That was Loma Linda. That was Dr. Len Bailey.
90s.
And that baby was a hypoplastic left heart.
Yeah.
And
so how do you get over people's mindset? Because they saw that it was almost, this will sound bad, but it was almost like a freak show.
Yes.
And people have that mindset. So what you're doing, and you start saying, oh, we're going to this, that, and the other thing. How does that conversation go? It's great for the field, but how does that conversation go?
I think we're going to do it differently. So I think we're going to put training wheels on first before we get on the road bike. And the way we're going to do that, so we've seen heart transplants done with pig hearts in adults.
Yes,
recently. They haven't been durable yet.
No, but they have been done recently.
But they have been done.
Yes.
So we're getting there,
so,
but it's not like a heart that this day and age you're going to put in and you're going to expect it's going to last for 5 years. What I think we need is we have a shortage of human valves, human heart donors, things. What I would like to do is I would like to use, and this is how we're setting up our experiments, is use the pig hearts as a bridge. So these are genetically modified pigs, and we use them as a bridge so that child, for example, the first child we'd done a partial heart transplant on, we got to day 17 of life, and we were like, we're going to have to do something different here if we don't get a partial heart soon. Fortunately, we did. But what would have been that would have done differently? Well, maybe in the future we put in a pig valve,
as a bridge,
a living pig valve as a bridge, and then they get their heart maybe a month later or 2 months later, their valve from a human.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective. So that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to ask, if we talk about all this high stress stuff that the two of you do, when you're Dr. Joe Turek, not pediatric. Congenital heart surgeon, what do you do to relax? Because I'm like, or what do you do away from the day-to-day of this stuff? Because it's stressful. I'm sorry, you're dealing with these tiny little babies and tiny hearts and stuff. So what's the relaxing for you?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I'm really relaxed in the operating room, and Dr. Plunkett came down and to his old stomping grounds at Duke last year and watched us do a case, and
fun.
It's just
Enjoyed it.
We have fun in the operating room. I love doing that stuff, and I find it to be incredibly relaxing when we're doing that. But in my free time outside of work, I mean, I'm usually just chasing my kids around. So I've got a couple boys at home. My daughter's a freshman in college now. But I spent last weekend down at an AAU basketball tournament, for the whole weekend in Myrtle Beach. So
that's probably more stressful.
Yeah,
sometimes.
It is. It's much more stressful. Yeah, those games were very stressful
because it's your kids, and it's a whole different perspective.
That's right.
Anything else we haven't covered that you think is important for people to know about the field and everything that's going on?
One thing I would say is these kind of exchanges I think are incredibly important. Like I always look forward to our scientific meetings where I can run into Dr. Plunkett or other colleagues and share ideas. These kind of like Dr. Geis's lectureship here. It's really nice because we get a lot more time together to be able to talk about things and share those. I mean, I think this is a fantastic thing you're doing, and it's really honoring somebody who is a real legend in the field. So,
yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to take, because I know you're not even in Peoria for 12 hours maybe. I don't even think it's that much. So we appreciate you taking time and fitting us into your schedule just to talk about the great things that are going on across Central Illinois, coming back to your roots. I appreciate it. Dr. Joe Turek, Dr. Mark Plunkett, thank you for taking time. And thank you for taking time to join us as well. And remember, you can see all of the OSF Healthcare Accelerated podcasts at osfhealthcare.org/accelerated.